Hey guys, how's it going? So I know there's already like a billion videos on YouTube that have been done before that show the sampling of One More Time. I think I've got it as close as anyone's going to get, and I really want to go in depth on that. Not necessarily a tutorial, but just kind of an overview. There's a lot of production going on behind One More Time, which a lot of people may not realize. So before we begin, there's two shout outs I have to make. One to a YouTuber, Brian S. Red. I'm going to link his YouTube channel in my video description. And Brian did a video back in 2007, summertime, I believe it was. Get out of here, iTunes. I'm not going to update you now. Anyways, he did a video proving that One More Time was sampled from the song More Spell on You by Eddie Johns. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have known, so shout out to him for that. Also, another YouTuber by the name of Dave23788. I'll also link that channel. And Dave was the first person to figure out how the sampling was. He pretty much figured out how it was done, and that's the foundation that I built on to get this, which is, I think, the closest recreation of One More Time that's out there. I'm also going to mention two freeware plugins that you're going to want to grab. They'll work in any DAW, they're VSTs. Number one, the Night Shine plugin by Disco DSP. This plugin basically replicates the Alesis 3630, and owning an Alesis 3630 myself, I can tell you that the sound of this plugin is pretty much dead on to the real thing. It sounds just like a real 3630, and it's going to be pretty difficult to nail the sound of this track without it. You need that really lo-fi aggressive bite. Also, the other plugin I want to mention is called Sample Reducer VST, or just Sample Reducer, and it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It's a sample rate reducer. It's available for free as well. I'm going to link both of them in the description, of course. So grab those, and let's get right into it. Now, there's a lot of processing on these samples. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. So Daft Punk probably used the EMU SP1200 sampler, which, if I'm remembering correctly, has a sample rate of 32 kilohertz, and it might be 8-bit or 10-bit. So really lo-fi, really crunchy. And according to an interview that was done with Alan Brax, who worked with Thomas Bangalter on the track Music Sounds Better With You, released by Stardust, he talks about how the sampler can only record 10 seconds of sampling. So what they would do is they would spin the vinyl records at a higher RPM, and it would be higher in pitch and higher in tempo, but the sample time would be shorter, so they could bring that into the sampler and slow it down. And the crunch from the sample rate reduction and bit depth reduction would become really prominent when you slowed the samples down. So we're basically replicating that. And then, of course, Daft Punk, what else they did on top of that was they were running their samples through their outboard gear over and over and over and over again. And when you do that, you are taking the analog saturation, the harmonic saturation, and you're applying it over and over and over again to the sound. So you're thickening it up, you're adding a lot of saturation. That's where the character is going to come from. So that's what we're replicating. So to start, you're going to need samples, of course, and I believe, yep. So I'm going to highlight this section here, and if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be a perfect loop. All right, so these are the samples you need for the intro. Right there. Those chords, you're gonna need those. Okay, so the first thing you wanna do is we're gonna time stretch, but of course we're gonna resample. So what resampling does is it's not going to make the audio grainy. It's not gonna chop it up into samples and do, auto crossfade and stuff like that. It's just decreasing the speed and the pitch together. So there's no artifacting going on. You're literally just playing it slower. So you want to go down by a semitone or half step, and then you're going to want to go down by about 43 cents. More Spell on You is, I don't know what tuning standard they're using for that one, but it's not A440. So it's out of tune with standard tuning. And One More Time also is out of tune with standard tuning. One More Time, like every other track on Discovery, is actually in A432. So to get closer to A432, we're going to go -1 semitone, -43 cents, except, there you go. So when you listen to it now, like I'll compare it. Okay, and then time stretch. Right? And this is just amplification. So you're either decreasing or increasing the volume. There's no processing going on here. You're just bringing the level down. So I've got it at 50%, so accept. Now, why did I do that? When you listen to the intro samples, well, any of the samples in One More Time, the drum hits in the samples are really, really pronounced. Even in the intro, where it's got the bass rolled off with some high pass and some low shelving, the transients of the drum hits that are coming from the sample are still really, really accentuated. And in order to do that, you decrease the volume, and you're going to apply something called the disco smile, which is a very esoteric term for those in the know, but I'll show you what it is. Grab your EQ, and we're going to do this. We're going to cut out a lot of the super low end, but we're going to do this. And a big boost in the bass, actually, maybe something more extreme like that. Then we're going to bring this down, right? We're going to bring this up here. We're going to scoop out the mids, boost the treble and the bass. And you can see this shape here is basically a smile. That's where the disco smile terminology comes from. So we're going to roll this off a little bit too. We don't want a whole lot of high end in here, but we're going to apply it. Now, take a look right now, right? Looks normal. Apply this and check out the transients. Watch this. Boom. See that? This is what you want. You want these transients to really poke out, and Daft Punk absolutely did this. And actually, you're going to want to go back and do it again. So bring this down a little bit. You don't want a whole whack load of bass. Maybe roll off a little bit more. Same thing with the treble. Roll that off a little bit more. Bring that down a bit. You know, apply it again. Just something like that. As long as you're keeping it in 32-bit float, you're not going to clip. So you can get pretty aggressive with this. You want the compressor to have something to bite down on. Maybe one more pass if you wanted to be a little bit more conservative with the settings. Something like this, maybe that, and then throw it on. Yeah, so it's not so extreme. Add that to the playlist and chop it up for the sampling. Now, we're not done yet. There's one other set of samples that we're going to need, and most people miss this part. So we're going to highlight here. So just for reference, this is at the beginning of More Spell on You. This is the very first brass riff that plays. This is the first time it plays, right? So More Spell on You, the track starts, you get some guitar stuff, you get some drums and a little bit of bass, and then the brass kicks in for the first time. The very first time it plays, this is what you want to grab. So 18 seconds to 30 seconds. And I'm just going to play it. You're going to hear it. You can really hear the brass coming through a lot more in this particular section of the song. So this is what you're going to want to grab. And you're going to want to do the same thing. So we're going to start time stretching. Well, really, it's just resampling. So now it's slower. Sounds great. So we're going to amp it. There we go. And we're going to do some more disco smiling. Okay. So, you want it extreme. I'm not going to go through that again because I already did it on the other sample. You guys get the picture. So once you've done it, 2 or 3 passes, send it to the playlist if chopped up. I don't need to send either of those to the playlist. I've already done the chopping up. So I'm going to show you how that was done. Let's bring the sample over here and place it right there. So just to prove that I'm not just chopping up one more time and using that saying, oh, I've got the most accurate recreation. I'm actually going to take my sampling here and show you guys that this is just More Spell on You chopped up. So as you can see, it's obviously not one more time. I can play the samples by themselves and you'll really hear it. So here's what the intro samples are going to sound like post-processing. Sounds really different, right? And then here's sample 2. Damn. And what you're actually going to do is layer them. So contrary to popular belief, there's no automation. The effects that are being put onto both of these samples for the character that the samples have is static. It doesn't change throughout the whole song. There's no automation, no automated high-pass filtering. The processing that's on both of these samples is 100% static, with one exception. And that's that little bridge part right before the breakdown where you just have the Rhodes. And we'll get to that point. But we're going to talk about the chopping up of the sample. So let's mute this. And we'll go back to the intro samples here. Okay, so we're going to make a chop here. All right. Now, this is 2 full quarter notes. Am I dead on the grid? Yeah, okay. And you're going to want to do this 2 times. So you've got 3 full, three half notes basically. It's half note lengths, but these are 2 full quarter notes per sample. But this one, you're going to want to extend it an eighth note and then a dotted quarter note. So let's, and we're going to highlight these samples. We're going to bring them to the proper, I've got the waveform memorized. I think this should be it. Let's check it just to make sure. Actually, that might not be the right spot. Oh, it is. Okay. So this one, here we go. I think that's it. Yep. Okay. So you just copy this 2 times. So there should be 3 groups of this little section here. And then again, but what you're going to do with the last one, pretend there's another full one over here at the start. But for the very last one, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of everything except for this eighth note. Copy that, stretch it out to a quarter note, and copy that all through here. So there should be 6 full quarter notes, then an eighth note, and then a dotted quarter note. And you're going to highlight all of these quarter notes and the eighth note, and you're going to slide this over. Where are we here? Right here? No. Nope, too far. I think it's right here. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically it. That's the sampling. Do the exact same thing here in this sample. So half note length, half note length, half note with an eighth note attached, and then it should look exactly the same. Okay? And when they're layered together, they sound like one more time. So I've got some white noise here. This is important because it's going to replicate the machine hiss that you hear from the sampler, from the EQs they're using, the compressors, all that good stuff. And we're going to go over what they did. What I'm going to note, and I'm going to come back to later and explain, you see that this is not just sample 1, but sample 1A. So there's 2 sets of this sample with this processing, and I'm going to show you where the second one comes in. So the intro goes for, what is it, 16 bars? Yeah. So it goes for 16 bars, and on bar 17, or I have it as 25 here because I've got 8 bars of silence at the beginning. I just like to give myself some room. But let's go here. This is really bar 17. But at bar 17, Romanthony comes in with the one more time. And then, of course, the other samples kick in, which makes it sound like there's some automation on the high-pass filter. There isn't. There's no automation, static processing, right? And then, of course, I've got a bass guitar down here. This is just some samples, some bass samples. It's one of the free direct waves that comes with Producer Edition. And I've got the 2 of them layered. That one layered with boo bass. And you can see here, I'm writing the volume. And it's basically just the drum compression because you can see these drum hits in the more Spell You samples. They're where the drum sound is coming from. There's no 909, there's no 808, no 707. There's no drum machine for the first bit of One More Time, right up to bar 25 when the drum machine actually kicks in. There's nothing here but samples and bass samples and Romanthony's vocal. That's it. No drum machine. The drum hits that you're hearing in One More Time are coming from the samples. So you want to accentuate that. And that's why I had you do that disco smile stuff earlier to the samples. And of course, further processing is going to nail that. So let's talk about the processing of the intro, right? This part here. Anyway, let me get the mixer up. Okay. So when I said there was a lot of processing, I wasn't kidding. There's a ton of processing. You can see I'm using every single effect slot, all 10 of them. Wait, is there 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, there is 10. Okay. I'm using all 10, and then I'm bussing it with the second set of samples, and both of those are being processed together in the samples bus. And I don't think I got any processing on the sidechain, but no, I don't. Okay. And I got a limiter on the master channel, but it's not doing anything creative. It's just limiting, pulling down the level a bit so we don't get any clipping on YouTube. But that's pretty much it. So processing, a ton of processing on these samples, processing together in the samples bus. All right. So we'll start with sample rate reduction. So I've got 2 instances of this. This is sample reducer that I talked about earlier. So switching between the modes just switches the character of harmonic saturation that's added to the samples or the sound that goes through this plugin. You can see I've got it at 32 kilohertz roughly, and I'm using mode 2. You don't really need to memorize these settings, but this is just kind of the general feel I'm going for. Now, next up, this is really interesting. Daft Punk did some really wacky stuff with the stereo image. So, More Spell on You is a stereo song. It's got unique information from the left and right channel, and then, of course, it's got the mid. But what they're doing here to the intro samples is they're completely cutting out the information from the left channel. So there's no left side of the samples. They're then feeding the right information of the samples into the left channel of the mixer. So it's kind of like a pseudo stereo multi-mono kind of thing. And they're playing with the phase and also the level. You can see there's about 2 dB of difference here. So the left channel of the mixer is going to be a little bit hotter than the right. 2 or 3 dB, not much, just a little bit for some stereo width. And then of course you're going to play with the phase. Now this is set to 30% right, and what that means is that the right channel of the mixer channel is going to be 30% out of phase with the left. All right, and then after that we've got this crazy nonsense. So I've got a high pass filter. It's at, what is this, 80 hertz? 85 hertz. And it's quite aggressive. There's also a really narrow bandwidth here. And whenever you narrow the bandwidth, high pass filter or a low pass filter, you get a really big bump that kind of makes it sound a bit more aggressive. It also doesn't sound like there's going to be less bass. It makes it sound like there's more bass than there really is. You can kind of make up for all the low information that you're filtering out by narrowing the bandwidth. And then of course we've got some more mid scoop going on. We've got some high mids boost. We've got some extreme cuts down here. So quick to note, this is not linear phase EQ. And this would be a really good time to use linear phase EQ because this will mess with the phase coherency of your samples. And that's because of all this extreme notch EQing and stuff like that. And this is just the beginning. There's a lot more than this. I have shelving right here. I've got some low shelving right around 170 hertz. What I'm doing here, why I've got these little narrow boosts here, is because I'm zeroing in on the intervals in the chords of the samples, trying to make it a little bit more musical. And then we've got a band limiter, which is the disco smile again. And then after that, I've got some more tone shaping. This is some crazy notch EQ. So this is going to be messing with your phase coherency even more. So a lot of stuff going on with the phase here. And then, of course, more sample rate reduction. Now I'm using mode 6, and mode 6 has some really, really rich harmonics that it adds. It almost sounds a bit like chorusing, not quite. You'll notice I don't have it fully wet. I've got it at about now 10 o'clock, something like that, 10, 11. The exact amount's not important, just the gist of it, and night shine. So this is the 3630 basically. It's got a pretty low threshold, 12.5 dB below 0, and then I have a pretty significant ratio, 5.4 to 1. You don't necessarily need the numbers straight on, just play with it until it sounds right. And then I've got the depth turned up a little bit. Depth is basically the wet dry mix, but there's something else going on that it does. I'm not 100% sure, but it gets the character of the 3630. And then of course I've got soft clipping turned on. So I also want you to note it's only being done to the drum transients in the samples. So I want the attack of the drum transients to come through the samples, and then I want the compressor to bite down on the bodies of the transients and push them down towards the average sustained volume. When you look at the meter here, the one in the middle, this is going to be gain reduction. So take a look at this, right? You'll notice it's not really affecting the sustained average volume, just the transients of the drum hits. And that's important. So after that, I'm going to play you this section here, and we're going to go on to the second set of samples because that's pretty much it. I've just got some further tone shaping here going on, just some more EQ, like crazy stuff, more phase stuff, and of course channel EQs engaged. So I've got some low shelving going on here. I've got a little bit of a mid boost, 500 hertz there, and then I've got basically a mid scoop because I'm boosting the high end again. So Also, I should note that on the second set of samples, sample 2, this is the brassy, bassy set of samples. It is phase inverted. And I had to do that because if I turned it off, there's some really messy phase stuff. So I've also got the stereo image opened a little bit, about 30%. Let's play the intro. All right, here we go. Sounds a lot like One More Time. Pretty much nailed it. So you can hear there's a lot of saturation in there, tons of compression. So getting to it, the very first thing I do is I've got a delay. And this basically replicates tape delay. The only reason I have it here is I'm giving a little bit of release to the transients. I want the attack of the transients to come through, but I want the compressor to really bite down on it. So as soon as the transients kick in, they are immediately ducked. Very, very aggressive compression. So this is just kind of helping to thicken up the transients. And you don't need the settings exactly, but that's basically what's going on. I have it in ping pong because I want the stereo image to be exaggerated. So the width of the track is coming from this second set of samples. So this is going to help that by being in ping pong mode, bouncing back and forth between the left and right channels. So next one, stereo imaging, of course. Now I'm not just playing with the phase here, which is 25% out of phase on the right channel. I'm also playing with a delay. And you can see that the left channel is delayed 1.7 milliseconds behind the right channel. And of course, down here, I'm also inverting the phase of the left and right outside of the mid to widen the stereo image just a little bit. And then of course, I've got even more of that on the channel itself. So a lot of stereo imaging going on here. Next, I've got a band limiter going on, the disco smile. Let's just cancel out the intro samples and we'll hear this one. Very, very aggressive compression. You hear the white noise, you can hear the transients coming through. You can hear the compressor really biting down on those transients, and that's where the vibe of One More Time comes from. So it's really important to do this. You want to cut out the extreme lows because you're going to make room for the 909 and the 808 kicks that are going to come in later when we've got the drum machine going. So then I've just got some more EQ, crazy EQ. I've got little notch EQ. I'm basically doing the same thing I was doing in the first set of samples here on this particular EQ. So what I'm doing is I'm zeroing in on the intervals that make up the chords and bringing that out for a little bit more quote-unquote musicality. It just makes it sound better. And then I've got a lot of bass boost right here. And of course, compressor, so 3630. And I'll play this and you'll see the gain reduction being applied. It's the same thing as the first set of samples, but take a look at the gain reduction. Right? So right here, you can see that the compression doesn't recover fully. And what that means is that the gain reduction is still being applied to the release in the samples, right? The brass that's ringing out after the drum hits is being compressed a little tiny bit. And what that's doing is it's ducking the brass a little bit, right? So that the high end from this sample can kind of shine through the mix a little bit more. It's just giving it some more breathing room. Because even though we've got a lot of high end on this set of samples, we still want that lo-fi crunch to come from mainly this set of samples. So by doing a little bit more aggressive compression here and having the gain reduction being applied not just to the drum transients in the sample, but also to the sustain, to the brass, that helps the high end breathe through the mix a little bit better from this first set of samples. So that's very important. Soft clipping's on, depth is turned up a little bit, and of course I've got not a super low threshold. It's only about 6 dB below zero, and I do have some pretty high gain reduction though, 5 to 1. So that's a lot of gain reduction. So I'm gonna click out of there. And we'll go to the last plugin. So for those of you unfamiliar with FL Studio, Overdrive, or Fruity Blood Overdrive, is basically just a preamp. It's just preamplification, and it introduces some color into the audio that passes through it. You can see there's even a color knob here. It sounds really pleasing. Like I'll play before and after, but let's disable it and show the difference here. Just gives it that extra something. You don't need the settings exactly. Just the gist of it is fine. All right, so I'm also doing some really crazy boosting with the low shelf. And then there's some mid boost going on, some low mid boost, and then a little bit of high end boost. And this is on the channel EQ. So the reason I have this gigantic boost on the low shelf is because the 3630, and this is characteristic of the Nightshine VST as well, but the 3630 is known to really roll off the high end. And it's not like there's a high pass filter in the 3630. It's just so aggressive on drum transients that it effectively rolls off low end. So I'm bringing that low end back a little bit, bringing a little bit more punch to the base of the transient so that they still have some body coming through the mix. And then I'm sending both of these samples together into the sample bus, which is just, you'll see some basic EQ. This is being applied to both samples at the same time. It's just a little bit of a low shelf to clean up a little bit of that really low end to let the kick drum samples, when the drum machine kicks in later, breathe in the mix. And then of course I'm selecting out the transients of sample 2, the really heavy transients to come through the mix. And then I've got some more boosting going on here. Just really finding the intervals in those chords that are in the samples again, and then boosting the high end, and just for some air. And of course I've got some more air going on here, and basic tone shaping stuff. Again, this will mess with your phase coherency. Look at this crazy notch filtering going on, crazy EQing. Now this is important to note. These few effects here are automated because these are going to turn on later, right before the breakdown. And you'll notice that there's a filtered section, and one more time, it sounds a little bit different. We'll get to that in a minute, but these three here are all being automated on during that section of the song. So this one, this is just the fruity filter. This is not automated. This is on the whole time. It's just applying some filtering on across both samples together, just to glue it together a little bit. And then of course I've got some more low shelving. A lot of low shelving going on. And then of course I'm zeroing in on the transients, a lot more notch EQ, some musical EQ here, and I'm not touching the high end here. Interesting. I guess that's to let a lot of the high end come from some of the percussion samples, like the hi-hats, the closed hi-hats and the open hi-hats. We'll get to that in a second. So then another thing that's important to note is I'm using EQUO just for the volume control, so I can automate the volume of the samples together, because there's a point later in the breakdown where they fade in. Next up, let's go to this section of the song, right here. So I think I did pretty good on the drums too. So what's going on here is that the drum machine is kicking in. And as you can see here, I've got a lot of percussive samples. Daft Punk probably didn't have access to a mixer with this many channels, but what they probably did was they probably grouped a lot of the samples together on the same channel and then processed them identically, which is why I have a drums bus, a kick bus, a snare bus, percussion bus, a lot of buses, a lot of processing, a lot of grouping. So kick 1 is an 808, kick 2 is a 909. I also have a high pass filter at 60 Hertz with a narrow bandwidth, so there's a little bit of a boost around 6 dB almost, so heavy boost in the low end. This is the reason why there's so much low shelving on the samples, because I'm letting this cut through a little bit more in the mix. So I'm busing the samples bus, right, over here, which has sample 1 and sample 2 together inside it. I'm busing that to the sidechain bus, where I've got EQUO, again for volume control, and the volume control is linked to this peak controller. The bass is at 50%, which means that the volume value here is going to stay at unity gain. That means that the default is unity, which you want. You don't want to boost it. This is inverted. So even though it's positive volume, this is actually going to go down. The degree that this is cranked to is the degree that this is going to be turned down like this for the pumping effect. Like when I play it, I'm going to have these two plugins side by side. You're going to hear the sidechain compression. There's a lot of it on the samples, but just take a look at this volume knob that is being ducked down every time the kick drum hits. But just take a look at this. Here we go. Now I'm gonna, okay, so it's at 87%. Just listen to how crazy this gets if I really crank it, and you'll hear what the drums are doing to the samples. All right, so I made it really extreme so you can hear what it's actually doing, but we're not going to leave it like that. We're going to make it a little bit more subtle. But one of the things that really helps the character of the drums processing in One More Time to make it not sound so much like just a regular old 808 or regular old 909 samples. Both of them are being buzzed together, of course, but you'll notice they're quite low in the mix. And the reason why is because I have this gigantic low shelf boost. And then, of course, I have 3 snares. So I think snare 1 is an 808 snare. Snare 2 is a 707. And snare 3 is a 909. I've got the attacks immediate, and I have the release pretty tight. So what these snare drums are doing, all 3 of them, is they're hitting, and the release is cutting off decently quick. Like I'll show you the samples themselves here. If I can get to the percussion bus, there we go. Our percussion group, and then we're going to go to snare 1. Yep, 808. Snare 2. 707, snare 3, 909, right? You can see I'm touching up the release. And then, of course, I have the kick bus, as I mentioned, the snare bus. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of compression, overdrive, some more preamplification, more overdrive, really. A little bit of a bass boost. And then, of course, I've got a high-pass filter at 80 hertz on here with some mid-boost on the 909. And that's because if you listen to the 909, and actually, you know what? The hell with it. I'll just play the sample itself. Here we go, 909. Right, so you can hear there's a little bit of that square wave distortion kind of ringing out here, right? And by boosting the mids like I did, it brings that out a little bit more. And then, of course, I've got my 3 snares bussed together, just some overdrive, right? A little bit of EQ, rolling off the high end with a high shelf. Then I've got a closed hi-hat. So the closed hi-hat is going to hit on every 8th note. All right, so you can see the closed hi-hat here. A lot of saturation. Look at this EQ here. A lot of boost in the high end, a lot of extreme low shelf roll-off. You can hear the percussion. I'm going to get rid of the kick and snare, and you're just going to listen to the percussion here. No snare, no kick. Just take a listen to this. Very extreme stuff. I've got some shakers. They're doing kind of like the basic pattern that this is going to make with the shakers, the maracas, is like... And there's also a heavy swing. It's at 66%, 2/3 of a 16th note. I don't want to do the mental math, but that's what it is. And then, of course, I have closed hi-hat that's adding to the snare, only hitting when the snare hits. And then I have the open hi-hats. So these are just, standard open hi-hat samples, 909 kind of stuff, filtered. There's a lot of compression going on, saturation. I've got some tambourine samples. As you can see here, all of the 16th notes, and I've also got the velocity messed with, so it's kind of humanized. So right at this point, I mentioned earlier that I have sample 1A. This is sample 1B. So this is still sample 1, still the intro samples with the, I'll just show you, right? But what you'll notice is that the transients of the kick drum are a lot more pronounced in this area than they are here, and I'll just play them for comparison. Sample 1A, sample 1B. Very, very different. The transients are way more aggressive. So again, I have the bass guitar samples kick in again with their little volume riding, and then this is the drum beat here for the hook section. For the first few bars, there's nothing going on but tambourine. The swing is turned off. There's no swing. So this is just straight up 4 on the floor. You'll hear the difference. I'm just going to play the drum beat by itself and the swing. There we go. So I'll compare them. Very groovy. You can hear the shaker I was talking about. Okay? And then over here, this is what the hook sounds like. Okay? The 909 kick is disabled. Then the 909 kicks in because it's the full drum beat right here. So I'll show you the difference here. Okay? Got the hi-hats kicking in, the shakers, everything. And the swing. Man, that's grooving. And of course, let's throw this in here too, just for fun. groovy. All right, so this is, you guys know this section. This is just this part here. And then repeat that like 7 times. And anytime you cut the samples off right before a break, leave the kick drum from this particular sample, let it breathe right here. And that's another thing I want to go over in the sampling too that I forgot to mention earlier, is that it does the same thing here, right? So you've got the kicks coming through. You can see it's very thick kick here. This is not the drum samples. This is just the kick from the samples being layered from sample 1 and 2. And over here, I want to go over this section too. Right before the drum machine kicks in, right? So take a look at this sample here. Well, you'll notice, same thing with the OG, is that the kick, the next kick that comes through in this slice of the sample right here, is actually flamming with the kick from this slice in the next sample. And that's because the kick is offset here by, how much would that be? Like a 30-second note, I don't know. But it's off, right? You can see the kick hits here pretty much on the grid. This kick is behind it, and that creates a little bit of a flamming sound that is also in the OG. And when you listen to it, just by itself, it sounds like this. You can really listen here and hear these two kicks flamming each other. Right? So whenever you have the brass kicking in and hitting the compressor before the kick drum does, it creates a really thick, really saturated kind of feel that leads into the kick drum. So the kick is not so in your face, but it's a little bit more laid back, and it's a very, very cool, groovy kind of thing that they definitely did intentionally. Anyways, let's move on to this section here, which is the little bridge thing that happens before the breakdown. So we've got this part here. Now, that doesn't sound exactly like the real One More Time, and I would play the real One More Time, but I'm scared I'm going to get dinged for copyright. But basically what I'm doing here is I've got the sampling, and I'm going to cut off the band limiter here. Where's the samples bus? Which one is it? Low pass filter? No. Bridge? Yeah, this is it. So I'm going to disable this. All of these, actually, that kick in during the bridge section. But just listen to how the samples are cut. So I'm playing the first quarter note here, but then this is moved over. So this would be the exact same sample copied. It's just that I moved it so that the brass lead in before the kick happens in this area here. So, all right, I'm not doing that with this set of samples, but, and then of course it's just this section here repeated 3 times, okay? And I'm going to turn on the filtering again. So what I'm doing here is obviously saw the band limiting, extreme band limiting, getting rid of all the bass, all the treble, a little bit of a notch EQ there. And then I've got my stereo imaging. This is just narrowing the image a little bit, nothing else. No phase stuff, no delay stuff. And then of course the final thing that's automated is this cool low pass filter. So I've got the low pass filter set to low pass mode alone. So it's just low passing. And then I also have really, really high resonance. So this is just basically narrow bandwidth, very, very narrow bandwidth. And then of course over here, I have this around the mid-range, something like that. And the cutoff itself is being automated. It's being linked to this automation channel right here. So if I go in to this little clip, you can see that it's it starts off fully open, and then the filter closes, and then opens up, and then closes, and then opens up and closes. You get the idea. And that creates this wow, 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 wow. You'll hear it. Now, I know they did a little bit more than that. It doesn't sound exactly like the OG, but that's the gist of it. You could apply further processing and nail that. And of course, this and this, they're just adding some more colors. I think I went over those earlier. They're on the whole time, and they're applying... they're just applying some saturation, some extra harmonic stuff to the samples throughout the track. So this part is the Rhodes and an organ, I believe. And let's see. Yes, you can probably copy this. I'll play this. Right, so you can hear You can see I quantized them to the grid too, but you can hear if you open up the road. Oh, actually, I think they're just bussed together. Yeah, okay. I've got some, look at this. Look how narrow this is. This is crazy band limiting. So I'm cutting off all the mid, all the high, and I'm just leaving the low mid and a tiny little bit of the bass. So this is going to let the vocals through. The vocals are about right over here. Romanthony's vocals are in this area here. So this is just letting his vocals breathe and providing some vibe to the track. So it's just a synth pad and the Rhodes that are layered together, right? Like if I turn off the low pass filter, or the band limiting actually is what it is. Just Rhodes, just a Rhodes, nothing special or anything really. And some saturation. And then of course I've got the synth pad here, an octave above, just for some more info, more information. Nothing special, just a saw wave with some unison, very easy. And then together, right? And then I've got them filtered. Really relaxing, actually. So you'll also want to detune both of those negative 32 cents because this track is A432, and going down by 32 cents is going to get you in A430 territory. Now next, you want to repeat this for 5 bars. So the actual measure is just 4 bars, right? It's 4/4. And then you have one more, and then you have this little bridge thing kick in that was earlier in the track, actually, right over here. And I'll play that very quickly for you. It's just the tambourines, a little bit of the shakers, no hi-hats, just the shakers and the tambourines. And the shakers, if I show you here, the maracas, they're very low in the mix, right? Tambourine is what's the main focus here. And if you listen to it, right? Just like one more time. And then if we listen to it over here, okay? Now what you want to do is all those elements of percussion, which I have bussed over here into the percussion bus, this only encompasses the tambourines and the shakers, right? The hi-hats, the open and closed, those are going into the drums bus, which the kick, snare, and these hats are going to. The shakers and the tambourines are the only things going to the percussion bus. And then, of course, I have a volume control here, automated, so that they can fade out here. And I'll play that, right? Nothing special, just simple fade out. And then, as I mentioned earlier, okay, so I have the volume come back in for the percussion because there's just one more time it loops over here. And then you have this fade in for the samples here, right? Just like the real thing. Oh, it's interesting. I just noticed I don't have the bass guitar samples in here, which is fine. You don't need them, but this is the part where the volume of the samples reaches the maximum value that it's going to reach in this section. It's not the full volume. That's not going to kick in till over here. I think unity, this is 50% is unity right here. So this is, you know, full volume, the same volume it always was. And then this is just a little lower. This is 45%. So 5% quieter than it was over here. It's just subtle, but it allows a little bit more room for the synth here. Well, really the keys and the synth pad to breathe. But this is what it sounds like. Got those tambourines, percussion, right? And when you notice right here, I have the volume linked to the Rhodes and the synth pad. Dead stop, okay? Whenever this part hits here, and you've got that little kicks coming through here, this part, right? Dead silence. Of course, we kick back in with what we had earlier. All right, just one more thing. So in the extended mix of One More Time, which isn't really a mix, it's just a version, it sounds exactly the same as the regular One More Time. It's just longer. There's a unique section in here where we do just the kick drum, and then Romanthony sings, you know, one more time, and then it's just the brassy samples by themselves. Right? The intro samples are cut out from this section, and there's no tambourines, there's no hi-hats, it's just the kick and the snare and sample 2. And what that sounds like is this. Right? So look up the club mix, which is just the 12-inch mix of One More Time. It's not really a mix. It's just edited to be longer. But there's a section in there where the regular album version of One More Time would normally end. Instead, you get this this solo kick and then this section here, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it. That covers pretty much everything. And there's no mix bus processing because I'm just busing everything out to the master channel. You could probably apply a little tiny bit of mix bus compression, maybe a little bit of EQ, but most of the vibe of the track is coming from the mix here. So yeah, that pretty much nails it. If you guys stuck it out to the end of this video, I really appreciate that. Hopefully this sheds some light on just how much is behind the sampling of One More Time. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks very much.